Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our last WOW event of the year of 2020. We all here hope you're all doing well and staying safe during these difficult times. For those of you who don't know me, I am Rhonda Ducote, President and Senior Wealth Manager here at Aprium. We have a little bit of technical difficulty this morning, so I apologize. Susan, our speaker, cannot get her video to work, so we're just going to be having a conversation. You're going to see me, and you're going to hear her voice, and we're going to go from there. It's just part of the challenging times of 2020, if you will. You know, Women of Wisdom was started back in 2014 to encourage, empower, and educate women to take more of an interest in their finances. We have an amazing speaker today, again, Susan Alpert, with us today. So thank you, Susan, for joining us. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Susan right now, and then we're going to go into a panel discussion discussing her book. Susan is an author, speaker, entrepreneur, and frequent guest on national radio and television shows. She is also an Aprium fan favorite. She's been to, I think, 3 or 4 of our WOW events in the previous years. So we're very excited to have her here again today. She's a successful businesswoman, educator, and serial entrepreneur. She lost her husband of 46 years to leukemia back in 2008 and found herself drowning in a sea of paperwork that only compounded her grief. Believing that no one else should have to face these confusing legal and financial obligations of loss alone, she created her step-by-step methodology as well as her first book, Driving Solo, Dealing with Grief and Business of Financial Survival, a combination of the business and emotional journeys that come with the death of a spouse. Susan's second book, which we are highlighting today, Later is Too Late, Hard Conversations That Can't Wait, tells the tales of 12 women who endured great loss in their lives and how they recovered and even triumphed. A 2-part self-help book, Later is Too Late, includes a series of her user-friendly step-by-step worksheets to help the reader navigate his or her own sequence of preparation. Susan holds a master's degree in psychology and education from Brooklyn College in New York and devotes much of her time to guest speaking engagements like these and pro bono work on the subject of grief and preparing for the future. Susan resides in Newport Beach and in Palm Desert, California. Knowing how important this topic is today to your financial well-being, Aprium would like to give each of you who are on the call today a copy of her book, Later is Too Late. You can email Sunny at sunny@aprium.com. As well, we can mail it to you or just call the office and we'll make sure you get that today. So I want to, again, thank everyone for your patience as we navigate through these technical difficulties, and thank you so much for joining us. Susan, are you there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you, and I wish I could see you, too. I'm so sorry. I was looking forward to being able to look at you and hear everybody who else contributed in any way. And I tried. I really tried. I don't know what happened.
Not a problem at all. This is going to be fun, but it's also a very serious topic. So we're going to have a nice panel discussion, and we're going to give all these listeners some good information to be prepared. Why don't we just kind of jump right into some questions that we put together and see where the conversation takes us.
That sounds great, and I want to thank you again for the opportunity. I love everybody I've ever met and been in contact with and Aprium, and you're just the greatest people, and I am so honored and flattered to be invited back again. It's wonderful. We all have such important information to share.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, I first want to kind of ask you, from your own experience, what led you to write both of the books, Driving Solo and Later is Too Late, and how did you become passionate about this topic?
Basically, I have never written anything in my life. I've never taken a writing class. I just did my life, which was great. And suddenly I had something to say. And it kind of said itself in the books. My husband and I had a great life. I'm very, very happy, very pleased with our life. And everything was going beautifully until he suddenly was diagnosed with leukemia, the worst kind you can get. And within 10 months, We had gone through everything, transplants. He was in the hospital. My life, of course, had turned completely upside down. I was running a business. I was part of a big family, and I was absolutely at my wit's end, but of course, went through it. And suddenly, about a couple of days before I knew he was going to leave us immediately, I pulled out my laptop in the hospital and said, okay, what do I need to live? And I had never thought about how much I spend. And I suddenly looked at things that I never thought about before. I spend a lot on greeting cards. Forget about the rent, forget about everything else, all the minutia that goes in our daily life. And I said, am I going to make it? What is this all about? And then, of course, he passed away. And I started to be hit with all of these amazing forms to fill out from everything. And to tell you the truth, it took me a year and a half to completely get as much done as I could. And I said, this is horrible. I closed my business and I devoted myself to doing what I had to do when somebody died. And I thought I was all prepared. Well, it turned out that there was so much there that I knew I had to share this and let somebody else not have to go through what I went through. It was hell, honestly, to be able to fill out the government forms, figure out what to close, what to open. And I said, I've got to do something. And that's when I started to organize my thoughts and put it down on paper. And one thing led to another, and I started to do speaking on television and radio, and it was just ballooned. And I realized everybody needs to know what to do. I don't care if you're a young widow, an old widow, a widower, a child whose parents have died, whatever it is, you need to know what to do and how to do it in an orderly fashion. And that made me put this down on paper.
Which is really wonderful. I mean, to take that type of loss and turn it into something so positive, I couldn't be, more proud to share your story. It makes me relate to my own story. As many of you know, I lost my father when I was 10 years old. I am the youngest of 7 children, and my mom still had 3 children at home that she was raising when my father passed away at 48. And what I realized going into my own career and looking at my own family is how much my mom had to do on her own, and she was just so unprepared. And had she had the step-by-step book of yours and to follow to make sure that, it doesn't matter how old you are, as you mentioned, you should be prepared in the event of a catastrophic event with your financial orders, so whether it's a will or a trust, healthcare directive, life insurance policies, knowing who your beneficiaries are. But again, my mother struggled for quite some time in raising us and not being prepared or ever thinking that my father would pass away as young as he did. So I can totally relate to your story as well, and the pain you have in losing your spouse and then having to deal with everything that comes along with that. Which kind of takes me to the next question. What was one of the most important lessons you learned from this experience?
Probably the now, and I mean that, to keep everything up to date now. I thought I was in good shape. I was so cautious. I had lists. I had contact numbers. I even sent them to my family in New York in case we had an earthquake here or a fire and my papers were lost. That's how conscientious I was, but I wasn't up to date. I didn't know who the latest beneficiary was. I didn't pay attention. I had a will and I had a trust, but it didn't matter because some of the papers I had and some of the investments were from 1987, from even earlier than that. And I didn't know, I knew where everything was, which I think to everybody is the most important thing. However, once you know where everything is, do you know what to do with it? And is it up to date? I think that's one of the most important things that you need to do, is you need to have everything up to date, but more than that, you need to be vigilant and work. If there's a spouse or anybody else, you both need to work together so that one person isn't in charge and then you know nothing. There are papers, and what do you do with them? So I'd say be current, be vigilant, and work hand in hand with, if not your partner, then somebody in your team.
Yes, I think that's really important, is to, make sure that you do work together, and that your family members or your loved ones, whoever is the closest person to you, knows what your plan is. We try to do that here at APRAM in updating financial plans and making sure that we've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. But more importantly, I think what you said kind of really resonates as well, is that even though you may know where everything's at and now you have a list of everything, it's important to keep it current. And what I mean by that is, we try to explain to our clients, that your minds change over time too, whether you're married or divorced or widowed. Your mind changes over the course of your lifetime. So every 3 to 5 years, you should do a recheck of those documents to make sure that your mind hasn't changed, that your beneficiaries, as you mentioned, are who in fact you want them to be. While you're alive, you can make those changes. It's just once you pass away and maybe people have predeceased you that are still listed. It just currently happened to my husband's aunt who passed away here back in August. She had her deceased sister named on all of her papers. And she's part of my family, so go figure that. So
believe me, we all know that.
Yeah.
It's one thing to know it; it's another thing to make sure to do it. And it seems like it's such a hard task to do this now, and yet it's going to be a heck of a lot harder if you don't do it now. And sometimes we need the motivation to get started, to get everything that we need in the right form, and then maybe just a couple of hours a day, or an hour a day, or once a week, just to get it up to date. You have no idea how good you will feel, and everybody will feel. And it's funny because we think we know so much, most of us do, or we say, well, I can get along. It's so important to keep it update, Rhonda. You're so right. And I've had an instance where somebody also was deceased beneficiary for everything, and what happened afterwards, then it became family battles or probate, and it gets very, very messy. So I agree completely to keep these things up to date.
Yeah, that brings us to a different topic, and I think that's again, another important factor is that, every family has different dynamics with their families, right? Whether they have siblings or children or aging parents or grandchildren. What would you say would be the most important thing to share with family members as you're getting all of these documents in order? Would you say that sharing your plan with family members, as part of that team that you said you have, would you feel that is one of the most important things to do? Or I talk to a lot of people on a daily basis or weekly basis, and sometimes family members don't share what their plan is. Like my husband's aunt, she didn't tell me or my husband, who are basically her only living relatives, like what her plan was. But would you recommend, and how much should you share with loved ones about your plan?
I have a 3-part answer to that. The first part is just an unequivocal yes, you should share. Number 2 is be discriminating with whom you share. And number 3, how much you share. I believe that if you have adult children or a spouse, they need to know that you have prepared this. Here is where it is. Here is the name of the accountant and the telephone number. And here is the name of the lawyer and so on. And of course, my financial advisor. They need to have a document that says this is where you will find everything, and this is who you will call, and here are their numbers, and here are the policy numbers, whatever it may be. They need to know that. I personally feel that's important. However, I don't think it's important that my adult kids know how much I have. That's my own personal thing. Once I've assured them that they will not have to support me, or somebody may tell them we may have to chip in, that's okay. But they know where to find every bank account, what the number is, just not what the balance is. And my kids and one of my relatives back east has that information. One location, where everything is. I gave them a copy and say, if I should pass, please open this. And it tells them what to find, where. And so that's my own personal. I have friends whose kids and spouses, of course, know where every dollar is, where every investment is. That's a personal thing. I personally figure my kids will find out when I die. Here, make this one phone call and you'll have all the information you need. That's one part. There's another little aspect that I think is important. When I talk about team, I think everybody, before anything happens to them, needs a team of an accountant, either a banker or definitely a financial investment advisor, such as you people, and a lawyer. Those three components, I found out from experience that if I had to find out if a certain form was filled out, I had to write to the attorney, who in turn wrote back to me, who I in turn wrote back to the accountant. And with that, I said, this is ridiculous. It's like a kid playing telephone in school. Start something, and by the time you get it back, it's not the same. So I thought it was important to get, from experience, a team of professionals and just say to them, you're all working on my behalf in some way. I wish you would all meet, introduce each other virtually, whatever it is. And if anything happened, you all have the right and the responsibility to put these things in order. Just copy me on everything. I needed to know what was going on, but I didn't need to be the conduit for the attorney to give me information to the accountant. And so when I talk about a team, I really mean your family team, your core team, and a professional team. So that at any point in time, thank God I'm still alive and healthy, but my accountant knows who my attorney is, who knows who my financial planner is. So everybody is in the loop. And that will make things so much easier for everybody. And it's really nothing more than a phone call. And everybody knows who everybody else is involved and important in this process. I know I gave you more than what you asked, but I'm passionate. I'm passionate about it.
I think more information on this subject is better. I think that it's really important, obviously having a plan. A lot of people look at the plan as your financial plan, but there's different plans too. There's a financial plan, but there's also, as you mentioned, your team, and it all intersects with one another. And I think that it's important to know that, you have a good CPA, and you have your estate attorney, and you have your financial advisor and or banker, whatever you feel comfortable with. And I totally agree with you that we do encourage all of our clients. We want to know who the estate attorneys are. We like to have copies of our clients' trust, healthcare directives, wills, powers of attorneys, as well as, I think this is one topic that a lot of people don't like to talk about is burial plans, and that's part of your plan as well, to have that organized so your loved ones don't have to plan it for you, and all of that can be taken care of. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience, maybe with your husband passing, and if you learned something from that experience that made you change your own plans when planning, obviously the end of life.
Absolutely. I even have a chapter in my book. I think I like the title better than the chapter. The chapter is The Party Nobody Wants to Plan.
Right.
It's true. Nobody wants to get involved in this. My story, little background is, unfortunately, I lost a lot of people when I was young. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles. By the time I had my first child, I had lost 24 family members. So to me, a funeral was something that happened. It was concrete. That's a terrible pun. It was concrete. I'm sorry about that. But when I wanted to have a funeral plan for us, my husband was totally against it. He was, Peter Pan. He was never going to die. I was never going to die. And every time I suggested it, he said, no, we'll take care of it. We'll take care of it. And finally, I guess I suggested it enough times that he said, you want to do it? You do it. And I said, okay, I'll do it. and I invited a funeral director, so to speak, a woman who takes care of all arrangements and buys plots and so on. I invited her to the house and said, I want to buy a plot. I want to make my arrangements and so on. And she said, and your husband? I said, he's in the car with the top down at the beach, listen to Vince Scully at a baseball game. He won't show up. No way is he going to do this. And that's the truth. And every once in a while, when she was there, he would call. He said, is she gone? And I'd say, uh-uh. And then, finally, when it got late, he said, aren't we supposed to eat tonight? I said, after I finish this. That was my own experience because I knew I had to do it. And that's what I did. And I am so grateful that I did that. I had bought the plots. I had paid for everything. I had it all arranged. And when Larry passed away, I think I had to sign a couple of papers, and everything was done. There were no discussions between family members. Well, what do you think we should do? I think we should do that. I think we should buy this and that. And I've spoken to funeral directors who said, if only people did it beforehand, they wouldn't spend the ridiculous amounts of money on the things that we sell them. And this was from the director themselves, because we're caught up in emotion. You've got to have the best of this, and he would like that, and she thinks this is good. And it's not. And the fact that you have so little to do afterwards, and I don't mean you, I also mean particularly your kids, if you have adult kids, or everybody. And I've spoken to a number of people who've had so many family arguments over what to do. And I said, I say, did anybody ask them what they wanted? No. It's so, the simple thing, again, is to ask what you'd want and handle the arrangements. And if you think, well, gee, it's so expensive, trust me, in another 2 years, the real estate will go up again. It'll be even more expensive. It's just something to take care of, to avoid more stress when you're under the most incredible amount of stress as it is. And it does and has led to some very unpleasant occurrences afterwards. So I say plan in advance.
Absolutely. I will say, I'll share with everyone, back when we did our trust, early in the early 2000s, I think we drafted our first trust back in 2002, and we've updated it and amended it over time, and we've changed people, and, as far as the executors and successor trustees, and, especially as my children are now grown and they're all over 18 years of age. But I think the hardest part is actually sitting down and having the discussion with your loved ones about, the end of life, and I think that everyone wants to put that on the back burner. And it is actually pretty amazing how you feel like a weight being lifted off of your shoulders once all of those documents are prepared and updated, and that even when it comes to the burial arrangements, or with your healthcare directive, where, if you were in a catastrophic state and you want to make those own decisions for yourself. You don't want somebody else to make them, including your spouse or your children. I think that is such an individual right to have if you're in a vegetative state or a catastrophic event happens where you're disabled, where you make your own choices. But as far as burial, whether it's cremation or a religious ceremony, I'll use another one of my own examples with my mother-in-law. I always laugh with her about it. She still is with us. She's in her 70s, and she has everything planned from, where she wants to be, how she wants to go, as down to the music that's going to be playing at her memorial service. So we kind of laughed about it, even though we were talking about her death. We kind of laughed about it, but because she got to say what she would like people to hear about her, as well as, the music even played. So you can be as descriptive as you want, or you can just be, a lot of times people just say, I want to be buried or cremated, and they leave it at that. I think the message that we're sending today is that, to actually, buy the plots, or if you want to be, cremated and scattered at sea, or whatever the case may be, it's so important to put those instructions in your paperwork as well. And then if you change your mind in 5 years or 10 years and you want to do something different, you can always make an amendment and change it as well. So having all of those, again, crossing the T's and dotting the I's, knowing that it can be amended or changed at any time, but it's based on how you're feeling right now. And if something does happen, your loved ones can deal with the grief of losing you, as opposed to having to deal with banks and financial institutions and whatnot. And you definitely want to avoid probate at all costs, especially here in the great state of California.
Absolutely.
It's backlogged enough as it is, but, you could be, I guess maybe can we talk a little bit about, we do this in some of our estate planning events, but I think, probates are a really good topic to talk about, because a lot of times people will just go, oh, I have a will, that's okay, I'm all done. I think avoiding probate and staying out of the court system, but what a lot of people don't understand is that, when you do have to go through probate, you're locked out of funds for, it could be anywhere from 6 months to a year, if not longer, especially if it's a complicated estate. So did you have any experience with that as far as being locked out of funds or bank accounts with your husband? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Fortunately, I didn't, but I know a lot of people who have, and all the people I've been speaking to, because I was very careful how I had things allocated, whether we had a trust which took care of the major things. The only thing in a will is, if you want your great-grandfather's clock to go to Margaret and the sterling silver to go to John, you can spell that out. But if probate gets involved, it tears people apart to begin with. Also, the lack of funds is so hard on people, and the emotional drain of the court. You're absolutely right. I'm fortunate that I was up to date on how everything was vested, where the monies were, and the fact that we didn't have to go to probate because we had a very active trust involved. And living in California, if you have $150,000 this year, I don't even know, in assets, and anything more than that, and you don't have a trust, you're locked out. You're in probate. But to answer your question, I personally did not, but I know people who did. And also, a couple of instances were with younger people whose parents hadn't done this, hadn't gotten their trusts in order, and these young people didn't know where to go to begin with. And by young, I'm not talking about 18-year-olds. I'm talking 20-year-olds, even 30-year-olds, who weren't prepared because their parents didn't prepare them. Probate's horrible, and we have to avoid it at all costs.
Right. It's a small price to pay to have a living trust done. A couple $1,000s is a one-time fee to have your loved ones avoid, all of the court proceedings that are entailed. Currently, that number you mentioned, to avoid probate, if you don't have a trust or a will, is $166,000 in the year 2020. So if you have anything,
raised it.
Yeah, and if you have anything over $166,000 in an estate of a deceased person, you're headed to probate, and you're locked out of those accounts. So in the example with my husband's aunt, she did have an estate under that amount, but we still had to do affidavits saying that he was the only heir to see, what she had available, meaning at Bank of America, or she worked for the court here in Santa Ana, and so she was a federal employee, and did she have any benefits there? We'll come to find out she had named her sister that had predeceased her. And so you're talking hours and hours of paperwork to try to, dissolve this small estate, but you just don't want to let it go. But bills still had to be paid. So I laugh with everybody here at the office. We did get an inheritance from her, and the dog's name is Carly. It's a little Chihuahua.
Oh.
But again, it was a lot of paperwork to close out her estate, and bills, final bills had to be paid, and my husband and I had to front all of that because it was just not as easy as it could have been. So again, when you're given advice, and it's up to everyone to take that advice, right? And to make sure that, I like to think of our team as like, everybody here likes to use analogies of a football team, and what we like to do here at Afrium is kind of be the quarterback, right?
Perfect.
Between the CPA, the estate attorney, and then your financial advisor. But also we talk about those other things too, having a current financial plan, having a current portfolio reviews to make sure you know what you own, where you own it, and more importantly, why you own it. As far as burial plans, things of that nature, it's all part of an overall ongoing plan that we have to keep current. I think it's, we're getting some really great questions coming in here, and we're gonna get to the Q&A here in just a few minutes. But I guess, what I would like to, maybe the last panel question for you, Susan, to talk about before we get into some really great questions is, in order of importance, who are the most important people to call after a loss of a spouse?
Obviously, there's usually a doctor involved who will take care of contacting the funeral home, or if not, you have to do that. Obviously, it's got to be your family and your very close support system. It's very important that you have somebody there, even though you think you're stoic and you can handle it yourself. You need to have people. Social Security has to be taken care of right away, and that's usually also done by the funeral home or whoever the people are in mortuaries. Then, of course, you're the team I talk about: the attorney, the accountant, the bank, the insurance. And insurance is very important. And one of the things that I found out is people don't realize how many insurance policies you have. You may say, I have a life insurance policy. Well, you probably have an auto policy. You probably have maybe a flood policy, depending upon where you live. You may have whatever it is. There are so many policies we have. And I have found from experience that the insurance company like to handle it quickly. They're not going to drag their feet. They want to get that done. So you want to take care of that as well very quickly. But your team, of course, has to be there, your family, Social Security, and all the periphery people. But a lot of that is initially, like the Social Security and the funeral home, can be handled by your medical team, whatever. But get your team in there right away. One of the things that you mentioned before about people being able to get into things and the executors and so on, sometimes people in my generation will have the power of attorney or an executor or a trustee in my generation. And not every, and as you can tell, I'm not Rhonda's age. I have grandchildren older than her children. So, but besides that, is that you need to have somebody who can operate a computer or fill out these forms. Don't have your great aunt who you love and was so smart years ago be in charge. It's overwhelming. So be careful who you have as these people. And whoever the people are who are doing these, make sure that they know your passwords and where to find things and how to get into things. Obviously, as you realize, Rhonda, I could go on and on, but I had to get those last things in.
I appreciate that, because again, I think we've covered a lot of information here, but what's really great about your books is that you do have that checklist, and you have that thing of in order of who needs to be contacted and what documents you need to have, and who's on your team and who should be contacted. I think that is so important. We've kind of talked about the top level things today, but there's so many more, the minutia in all of this. As I was giving the examples and you were talking about your husband's estate, there's so many things to consider, but to get everything down on paper and to have a checklist that you've addressed all of them, from, creating the documents to choosing your financial team, CPA and estate attorney, to the funeral homes, to having the list of passwords and accounts and things of that nature. So you're just trying to make it easy as possible for those you leave behind. So, again, it's hard to talk about it. I think it's a hard discussion to have, but once you have it, it's actually very invigorating, and you just feel like a sigh of relief that you have your affairs in order. And so we're just here to give you a little bit of advice on the things that maybe you covered, but maybe you need to update, but more importantly, other things that you haven't considered, like the burial arrangements or the passwords, and share this information with your most trusted loved ones. So I think that that's a good place to stop and maybe take some questions from our guests today. So I think this is a really great one. And I'm not sure who thought of it, but I think it's a great question. How do you prefer to be addressed since your husband's passing? Do you have a preference? I mean, I think that's such people probably don't think about it. I know that I've thought about it in the past after someone loses their spouse. Do you want to be addressed by Ms. or still Mrs.?
That is so individual, and I can only speak about myself because I've been in business before this, the book part of my life. I've been in business for so long. I had my own identity. I went by my husband's name, but I had no problem changing over to Miss or nothing in front. And I had an interesting thing also that somebody had said to me, you don't have to be Mrs., but sometimes people feel better if they're going to a mechanic. Somebody will think that you have a husband, he'll take care of it. And then other people will say, you know what, I can take care of this. I can buy my own car, I can do this. It's so individual, which also goes along with what do you do with your wedding ring and your engagement ring. And I will tell you in all of this, it's as fluid and changing as your estate and your estate beneficiaries. It's how you feel at a particular point in your life. You will feel strong sometimes and want to walk by yourself. And other times you will feel, I'm not alone. I still need to be joined and thought of as my husband. Some people want to move on with their life and find another partner. And other people say there will never be another partner in my life and will continue to be Mrs. So, great question. It's how you feel about yourself and your place in the world at that time.
Right. Yeah, I think it is. It's such an individual. I know my mom stopped wearing her wedding ring after probably a year or so after my father passed away. But then from time to time, he's been gone now for 43 years.
Yeah.
So now you guys know how old I am. But, again, she would put it on from time to time. And then at some point she, gave it to one of my siblings. And she also gave away my father's wedding ring. I have that. My husband wears it. But again, it's such a personal decision on what to do with those items, especially how you're going to be addressed going forward. So thank you for answering that question. I thought it was a great question. We have another question here about probate. What needs to be listed in my documents? I recently found out that my residence was not in my husband and myself's name when he died, and it was an issue. It was in his name as a single man. We never updated. Do I need to list the property in these documents? I am making sure all of my homes are listed in my updated trust now. Your thoughts, please.
I'm not quite sure. The home is listed.
I can probably answer that too. As far as what documents need to be listed in your living trust. Well, first of all, to avoid probate, you do need a living trust, and I recommend that for anyone who has that estate over $166,000 to avoid probate and stay out of the court system. But yes, all homes, all real estate, whether it's investment properties, whether it's if you own a home with your children, all of that should be listed in a living trust. Business entities as well, depending on your partnership agreements and so on and so forth, or if you have an LLC, things like that are outside of the trust. All of your retirement accounts are named individually. That does not go in the name of your trust. Preferably you should list your beneficiaries as individuals, meaning a spouse and or children or grandchildren. But if you don't have those, you would name your trust, and it would go into the beneficiary would be named your trust. But your individual retirement accounts like 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs you would name an actual beneficiary. So your personal property is also part of your living trust, meaning anything in your home, jewelry, artwork, all of that would be named in your trust. So, and then of course your burial wishes are part of your will, for each of you, your spouse and yourself, or if it's just you. And you can be as explicit in the will as you'd like as far as your burial plans. But again, a list of accounts is really important, where they're at. And, accounts change, from Fidelity to Schwab, or maybe you have it, you had an old bank account, but now you don't have it anymore. So that schedule in your living trust should be updated, every few years as well if you've made changes. I think what's really important too that we didn't talk about in the living trust is if you have minor children, and making sure that you've named a guardian for them. That's another reason to have a trust, is to name a guardian. You don't want the court to name a guardian for your minor children, for the younger folks out there on the call today. You want to be able to designate who you want to care for your minor children in the event of an unforeseen circumstance. So that was a great question as well. Here's another question on charitable contributions. Is it easier to contribute when you are alive or leave bequests? What is the easiest way? Again, Susan, I don't know if you have any comments on this. This is kind of more of a planning question, but, this is another personal, decision to make as far as, charitable contributions. I always like to say, if you can do it when you're alive, if you're philanthropic and you would like to, give to organizations while you're alive, and you could actually see the good you're doing to organizations, if you are so inclined to do so, I like to say do it when you're alive, especially if you can afford it. But also, I have it in my own trust account. If there's a catastrophic event with me and my husband and my children, that I've named certain charitable organizations for our estate, and it will go directly to them in the event of an unforeseen circumstance. So I don't know if you have any comments on that as well, but again, it's a personal preference. But I think if you can afford it and you can see, these organizations, do good while you're alive with contributions that you make to them, I think that's a wonderful cause. So.
I agree, and I think one of the things that you might want to run it by, in case you're not certain, is you might want to run it, what your plans are with both your estate planner and with your accountant. You might take a second look at your finances and your longevity projections and so on, and just make sure that you leave yourself protected. But if you can do it, I agree with you.
Absolutely. I think we have time for maybe two more questions. I think we talked a little bit about this with online accounts and account passwords. What's the easiest way to keep track of those? Susan, do you have any suggestions?
Well, what I personally do is, there are two things that I do. I have a portal with a financial agency who has all my important information, passwords and so on. And they have portals. This is getting more and more common with accountants and attorneys and so on. But also on my everyday thing, I've always, for the past 10 years, a encrypted password list with a company. I use Dashline. I used to use RoboForm. And what that makes me feel very good. I have a major password, and then I just go into that major password and type in the name of the company that I want, or whatever it may be, and it automatically will connect me, because this company, in this case Dashlane, but there are lots of them that do this now, they have my password, but it's encrypted when it goes out to anybody else. So number one, I don't have to have everything right on my computer or on a piece of paper next to my computer. But I will tell you, I do have it typed out and hidden someplace in case I forget or things change. But I think it's important to have that someplace. And if there's somebody that you trust explicitly, like a child, an adult child, or whatever it is, or your spouse, of course, they should have either access to the encrypted form or a piece of paper with the passwords. But you've got to have them. This is so important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think having one of those, the company that you use, we use Lastpass here in our room, and that's again, another way to store usernames, passwords. It's all encrypted. It's safe. You don't have to have it written down, but again, if you want to have those written down with your documents in a safety deposit box or with a trusted loved one, I think that's a good way to do it as well. Just to make sure that, again, people you leave behind know where all of your stuff is at, meaning all of your accounts. And the best way to do that is, to have somebody that they can call, like your advisor, CPA, state attorney. And that's why I'll keep driving that message home with everyone, is to make sure that, you have somebody quarterbacking it for you and making sure that they know where all of your documents are at, where all of your accounts are at, and that you know who to contact in the event that something happens. So I think that's a great way to track it as well with a company like that. We do have at Apprium, we have our vault and our portal too, Susan, as you mentioned. A lot of companies are doing this now. A lot of clients, use their vault on TotalView, which is on apprium.com. I suggest anybody who is a client who's on the call today, that if you haven't explored that, to call our client services team with Sean, Megan, and Sunny, and they can set up a tutorial of the vault and TotalView. Christopher and Megan in our financial planning department can also give you a tour of how to access your plan, as well as other documents, and even a budget and your spending tab and an income plan. So take advantage of the technology that's out there. It's safe, it's encrypted, and it's all in one spot, which is really nice too. You can also link up outside accounts, so you can see all of your financial profile in one spot. So again, I highly suggest, if you haven't done that, to do that. You can put documents in there. What I put in there in my own vault are my copies of my passports, driver's license. I have all of our birth certificates, death certificates of those who've passed, visas, anything like that, where it's all in one spot. So if I'm traveling, I can access it. If something happens, life insurance policies, titles to cars, DMVs, artwork, the list goes on. But the more that you can consolidate and get everything to a centralized location that's secure, that you don't have to worry about, the better for when a catastrophic event happens. And so, lists of your doctor's names and dermatologists, and I have everything in there. So if I'm anywhere on the planet, I can access it as long as I have Wi-Fi, or I can just call the office and they can get it for me as well. So,
Rhonda, you are amazing. You are the poster child for what you should be doing. You are. That's great. We have to remind everybody, though, you don't do this overnight. You don't do this quickly. I mean, it's going to take you a while, but don't plan to have everything done in a week. It'll take a while, but boy, are you going to feel good after that. You're going to be so on top of things.
Once you get it all done, then it's just, you kind of go in. I think Ben uses, our CIO, he uses the analogy of a car. You buy a car, and every, year or so or 6 months, you have to go in for a tune-up or an oil change. And then it's just like autopilot. So I think that's really important to have your plan. It takes a while to get it done, so don't feel like you're behind the 8 ball. And, take a year or so to get it all done. And once it's done, you just have to tune it up every once in a while, because it's all in a segregated place. So I want to, again, I want to thank everybody. I think this is a good place to end. And again, I wish I could have, originally when Susan and I talked about doing this, we were going to do it in person as a conversation in 2 chairs with a great backdrop. And of course, with COVID and doing everything remotely, and then of course having technical difficulties, we couldn't see Susan live today, but we got to see her beautiful face, as I mentioned in the beginning. I want to thank you so much for your time today, and taking time to go through this. I love both your books. I read them back to back a few years ago. Again, for anyone who wants a copy of her book, Later is Too Late, Apprium has them for you, and we will be happy to mail them out. You can, call the office or email Sunny, and she'll get that out in the mail to you this week. Her other book is Driving Solo, another great one. If you want to pick that up, I know you can get them on Amazon. or just call the office and we can get you a copy as well. So again, thank you everybody for joining us today. I know that these are challenging times, but we're going to get through them together. Please call to schedule your year-end review or an update to your financial plan, or to look at the vault and to start this process of getting everything organized. We'd be happy to help in any way we can. I wish you all the best holiday season. 2020, we're going to look back in the rearview mirror and be glad that it's 2021. It's been a crazy year. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy. But we'd love to talk to you remotely via Zoom call or GoToMeeting when you have time. Susan, I want to thank you, and I can't wait to see you again in person. Thank you for your time. You're a wonderful steward to help people get organized and share your experiences of the loss of your husband and how you've helped so many people over the course of your career. I want to thank you from the bottom of our heart for always being willing to do these events. And again, I wish you all a happy holiday season. Stay well, and if you need us, just give us a call, but we'll see you very soon. Thank you.